In our fourth episode of the UX series, we'll be talking about prototyping and the advantages that it brings to your product development work process. Let's dive in. Prototypes have been a part of the UX design process for quite a while now, but it hasn't been long that they got the attention that they truly deserve. So let's start with a short definition of what a prototype is. It's a simulation of a real product that is used for testing and gathering feedback, giving users a much more involved experience. It can be a low-fidelity or a high-fidelity prototype, or, if you ask me, everything in between, because its main purpose is to simulate the end product. You might be thinking, what is a low-fidelity or a high-fidelity prototype? If we want to keep it short, a low-fidelity prototype is the most basic prototype that only has sketches, and it's focused on clarifying the main flow of the product without taking in consideration any visual element. On the other hand, in a high-fidelity prototype, you will need to have the finished UI design, and it has to have the UX logic that you would like to see in the developed product. Basically, it's a dummy version of the end product because it doesn't have any code in the background. So where does a prototype fit into a product making process? Well, it depends on how detailed we want our product to be when we test it. You can create a basic prototype out of wireframes so that the main steps are obvious to the users and the test group. Or you can prepare a prototype just before the development starts so that it can be as detailed as you want the final product to be. Let's take a look at how a product development flow looks like. First, there is the idea. Then you can decide to contact an agency to do the market and audience research, or you can do it in-house. With that data, you can start building the user personas and then put together the user flow and wireframes to create the design. After the design follows the development and the end product is done, right? Well, not quite, because it's an ideal situation, but we don't live in an ideal world. The process might have a few bumps on the road, because after you are done with the wireframes, there should be a feedback round with the product team to see if everything is covered. If something is missing, you need to add those elements or rethink a few layouts and then sit down with the team again for another feedback round. Usually only after the second round of feedback and implementation is where the wireframes are done and the design phase can begin. Here you can have a lot of back and forth movement with the team if the envisioned product is not clear enough. Usually there are 1 or 2 rounds of feedback on the designs as well that are based on a design workshop, so the whole team understands the meaning of each element, and only when the last UI element is covered, we can start the development process. If we take a look at only the financial part of the project, we can immediately tell that starting the development process after the design is approved costs more than if we would invest in prototype. That's because any changes in the development process can take up more time and effort to correct than it does in a prototype. Let's take a custom web page, for example, that has a hero section, a slider, a highlighted product section, followed by news, contact info, and a footer. If the UI design is already done, then the development phase should take up an average of 2 weeks. On the other hand, a prototype can be presented in about 2 to 3 days. Give it a week if it's a more complex site like an e-commerce site. And then comes the feedback, or the famous sentence that gives all UX designers the chills. It's nice, but I would like to add X, Y, and Z and remove A, B, C instead. This can drive your estimated product cost to the roof. Modifying a developed product feature can take up between 2 days to a week, while if we have a prototype, it can take up to 1 or 3 days depending on how much the UI layout has to change. But what if we want to change 5 features on the web page? After the changes have been made, we agree that the product is done. In the case where we use the prototype, we will still need to develop But even so, you can tell by just looking at the two graphs which one will be more time and cost effective. I'll let you do the math. Don't get me wrong, you won't spend less on development with a prototype, but you will save the extra change requests that raise the costs of the final product. If you leave out prototyping and start asking for changes in the development phase because you imagine that the UI would work differently, well, then you should count upon having extra work hours, and that will increase your estimated costs. After all changes have been approved and everybody is satisfied with the prototype, only then I would recommend to start developing. It will save you time, money, and a lot of headache down the road. In the next episode, we'll talk about how to implement UX design in your business. Subscribe and hit the bell notification so you don't miss it. Until next time, see you.